In this video, let's talk about the other phase that never really gets touched upon when it comes to time exclusivity, deadlines, contracts, and things that happen behind closed doors that may seem on the surface very, and sometimes things are not what they appear to be in life. So let's touch upon this topic. What could be the factor for Monster Arts to lately be delivering such a sloppy work when it comes to their figures? Many companies partner up together by contract. They either do 1 or 2 years or for a time exclusivity. It all depends. And that means sometimes not everything goes the way you plan with those contracts. Sometimes you have to rush certain things to meet expectations within those contracts that have been signed by both companies. And that also means communication might not always be the best with certain companies. Some of them might be excellent, some of them might be extremely poor, and it can sometimes lead to confusion, miscommunication, problems. Multiple things can go the right way, and multiple things can go the wrong way. Now, have you noticed a big difference with legendary figures from the Monsterverse and Toho figures with Monster Arts? Take a second to think about it, maybe a few minutes, analyze the figures, and let me know if you can spot a difference between both of them. With the Toho monsters, you can tell that the quality seems to be always applied much better compared to the Monsterverse. You have better articulation, details is much better, accuracy is on point. When you look at the Monsterverse, sometimes articulation is not the best, and accuracy seems to be a 80% to 90%. Now, you might ask yourself, why is this happening? Why is there a difference between both of them? Well, you might remember Toho is located within Japan, so is Tamashii Nation's Monster Arts. Therefore, their relationship or friendship is closer. Communication could be possibly better between them. They could possibly get access to those files, to renders of the models, allowing them to fluidly work with those models when creating them, when sculpting them, or making it just easier for the sculptor because he has more access to Toho's inventory when it comes to different things, different angles, the colors, behind the scene movies, or in fact, they could possibly have access to the whole set in person. They can go visit the headquarters, the factory where they stay at, talk to them in person to get a better understanding and guide them to how they can model this figure. Now, when it comes to legendary, they are all the way in the US. That's a whole different thing. So maybe communication is not the best. Obviously, it has to happen through phone, through a call, through messages. Whatever the case is, I'm assuming communication is not as good as Toho with Monster Arts. Now, to give you guys an example, back when Godzilla 2014 was going to release, Monster Arts, the original sculptor, I think it was Yuji Sakai, didn't have access to the renders for the model of Godzilla. Back then, a lot of people didn't even know how Godzilla 2014 was going to look. It was always a mystery. You could see like the shadows. At the time, what the sculptor had to do was based on what we saw in the trailers and some images that were out there. He had to use his imagination to put together the figure for Godzilla 2014. It was a combination of what was known Godzilla 2014 was going to look and a little bit of his point of view. That's why that figure looks more stylized, because at the time Monster Arts didn't really have access to the 3D files, the 3D renders of Godzilla 2014. When you look at NECA, their figure was the superior one, no doubt about that. At the time, a lot of reviewers, YouTubers, and the whole community could agree that NECA was the better figure, and a lot of us were surprised by how a much cheaper figure was doing a lot better. While Monster Arts was priced at $100 to $150 with the special edition, there was no doubt that the big differences between them was very clear as day. All of this happened because NECA actually had access to all the 3D files, all of the renders coming directly from the movie. So perhaps the whole topic that Legendary was located within the United States gave NECA an advantage could be a possibility. And Toho located within Japan gives Monster Arts an advantage That's their hometown, that's their home base. Both of them would have a better communication, friendship, deals would be done a lot smoother. And that makes a lot of sense. If you think about it, NECA was struggling so much with the Toho license. There was a few interviews back in the day where they mentioned that communication was not the best when it came to Toho. On YouTube, there was a video, I'm not sure if it's still up, where the head of NECA was talking in an interview where sometimes communication was extremely bad because they had to get the green light from Legendary, and then from Legendary to Toho to Legendary, back to them. And sometimes their projects wouldn't get their green light through Toho, and then from NECA they would. So you could definitely tell that communication was better with Legendary versus Toho. And they even mentioned that they had plans to create 12-inch figures, but unfortunately, they just never got the green light from Toho. They even had a Ghost Godzilla in the works. That never saw the light of the day, so that got canceled with multiple projects. They always wanted to create other monsters outside of Godzilla. At the time, the license was very expensive. Toho just doesn't give away the license to anybody, so it was very difficult. And it makes sense why NECA wouldn't want to acquire again the license for Godzilla. It was very troublesome. They didn't have the freedom as they would have liked compared to MonsterArts and other companies. And that takes me to my other point, which is contracts and deadlines. When doing a contract, certain companies are obligated to perform at a certain rate, meaning that they have to pump out certain releases within a time frame within that year or 2 years, depending how long the contract is and what is acquired through that contract. Unfortunately, this means sometimes companies have to rush a certain product even if it's not ready because of those investors, because of those contracts. And this could possibly be happening to MonsterArts, and that's why we saw what's happening with Godzilla X Kong the New Empire. Now, within those contracts or within that calendar, certain companies have to release, let's say an example, 50 figures to 100 figures or maybe 200 figures. But if you were to want quality, then they would have to cut down on production within those figures, meaning that certain characters or monsters that you want within that company to be delivered are going to be cut out from that line completely, because to deliver something that has quality requires time, dedication. So focusing on a single figure to really get it up to par and the very best that they can means that it's going to take more time, more resources into that figure rather than pumping them out as fast as possible. Here's an example. Let's just say that MonsterArts was going to pump out as fast as possible all the figures from Godzilla X Kong. That means Godzilla, Kong, Scar King, and Shimu, and others, right? Fans might be disappointed because quality is not up to par, but they at least got the figures to a standard, They're not the best, but they're not the worst, and they were able to at least meet expectations with that contract, pumping out all those figures as was promised. Now, let's look at the other side. For example, what if they only had time to deliver at least 3 quality figures, or maybe 2? That could be Evolve Godzilla and Scar King, because they are putting that extra time, dedication, and resources onto those figures. It would mean that unfortunately, the other remaining monsters will have to be cut from the line, or at least get delayed until they are done with those figures within that contract period. So it becomes, would you rather have quality over quantity or quantity over quality? It's easy as that. And sometimes companies have to take those hard decisions. Sometimes the surface may not be as easy as it seems. There's a lot of things that factor within contracts. And because of that, unfortunately, many companies are affected. They're not able to deliver what they wish because they don't have access to certain things. Think about it as video games and what happens to some developers. The famously known company Activision, we know that sometimes they rush their video games like Call of Duty. Call of Duty Modern Warfare 3 released in a very bad state because that game was rushed. And some people take their frustration on employees, and in reality, that's not the truth. They are doing their very best as possible, and unfortunately, they are tied to that contract, even if they wanted to do their very best and take more time. The harsh reality is, it's not possible sometimes. Think about it like this. Imagine if you had to finish a whole figure within one day and you had to engineer articulation, you had to paint it, you had to figure out multiple things. It's not going to be possible to deliver a top quality figure within a day. So at least what you're going to be able to do is try your very best within that time period. But obviously, it's not enough. So, yes, sometimes contracts and bad management within leadership can lead to a company doing very bad products, delivering very bad movies, video games. In general, it happens to all companies. Not all companies have the very best relationship with their workers or with contracts. Some contracts are very extreme, others are very open, and they have the freedom to do whatever they desire with that character. And this brings us back to the topic of having access to those files, to those renders of the model. Some companies don't really have full access to everything, so they have to use their imagination and go based on what they have to deal with it. And that's why sometimes figures don't look 100% accurate. Despite that, it doesn't mean they didn't give it their best, because they did. And sometimes people like us, we don't see what happens behind closed doors. To back up everything I'm saying, I have a clip from Shartimus Prime. He's doing an interview with Hasbro and the Marvel Legends team.
Out as much as we can. So when there is a figure that maybe is, partially pinless, or it's kind of using that older buck, it is not because we forgot. It is not because we're not trying, right? It's because of all these other factors. And I would just remind everyone that not all toy lines are fully pinless. So, right, like I think get some criticism for when newer figures have pins, but like that's because I think we are at the forefront of the fully pinless, and we're slowly working towards more. You see that new Wolverine from X-Men 97, fully pinless. It kind of looks similar. So we're looking to make those upgrades where we can. And so, yeah, we appreciate your guys' patience, and we are doing our best to make sure that, the best figures are coming out on that basis, on all the characters and all the movies and shows and everything we need to constantly be activating.
Think of it this way, Russ. If we had, we're going to do some pretend numbers. If we are currently delivering you 100 classic figures a year of all the A through Z level tier characters, right?
Okay.
And you like that, right? You like getting a lot of diversity and a lot
love new
of
characters. Yeah.
If we were going to make every one of those things all super articulated, all new, you would only get 30 figures for the year.
Okay.
70 figures go away.
Okay. Make them all. Yeah, I would rather have quality over quantity.
But when you do that, you need to have those big tiers that not just appeal to you, but appeal to everybody in the world. So no more Crystars, no more Power Princesses, no more.
Because they need to sell 3 times the amount if you're making a third of the figures, right?
Yeah.
In Dwight's math.
So
Dwight's math.
It's just Dwight's math. This is just BS
That's
math.
Not just including comic figures now.
Yeah.
So we need to also make sure that we're making MCU figures too. So then you're going to cut out Blade. You're going to cut out Daredevil. You're going to cut out the animated line.
Yeah. So all of those. So that breadth that you just said you like is gone. So by doing it this way, by using the pieces that we have in our massive library, we're allowed to give you things, and they may not be perfect for you, but it allows us to represent all these amazing characters from all the years in some fashion.
There you go. They've confirmed everything that I've been talking about up until this point. And remember, not all companies work the same. It all depends on the type of contract and what happens behind closed doors. Now, those last sentences were very interesting, how they are targeting their audience and what type of audience they want to appeal, which take us to topic number 3. MonsterArts isn't really appealing to the US side of the things. Their marketplace is Japan, that side of the things. That's where Godzilla is home to. So their focus is a whole different target than what the US really cares. That explains why we see monsters that appeal to them and not appeal to us, because it's something that we don't want. Our focus is something else. Perhaps we want more MonsterVerse figures, but over on the side of Japan, their focus is on Toho monsters. Their plan is totally different from what the US has. If you recall, Monster Arts really didn't have any stores located within the US or outside of Japan until recently. It's been starting to happen, and that's because Monster Arts and Tamashii Nations, everything as a whole, is starting to expand. They are starting to reach other places besides Japan. It doesn't mean that they don't care what the US thinks of Godzilla or what we want. Of course, they take us into consideration, but not as much as their main priority, which is their target, Japan. Their home to classic Godzilla, and what they love can be totally different to what we want, if that makes any sense. That also explains why NECA was delivering figures at a much better quality with paint job and pumping them out a lot faster compared to Monster Arts at that time. A good comparison, Mothra and Rodan compared to Monster Arts. Even though both of them were great, we all know that NECA delivers such a good Mothra and such a good Rodan. Perhaps the same thing could be applying to Haya Toys. Maybe their contract is a lot better. Maybe they have a better communication with Legendary. Only time will tell how well Haya Toys can keep up with the classic Godzillas, if they have the same issues or not. And this all depends. Again, not everybody is under the same contract. Not everybody has the same communication. Now let's move on to topic number 4, factories. A lot of us like to blame the original creator or the original sculptor for having a bad design, when sometimes it could be the factory's fault. The original sculptor can deliver a very impressive, accurate Godzilla sculpture, right? And then from there, the company takes it to the main factories where mass production starts happening. Now, there's going to be a difference if they're using robots or if they're using people. If they're using people to paint every single figure, again, remember, we're human beings, we're not perfect, mistakes happen, and that's why sometimes some eyes look derpy, some teeth look messy, the paint job isn't up to par, and that's why many of us get a different paint job. Now, if it's done by a robot where it has instructions within the system to do the eyes in a certain way, to do the paint job, then it's going to be done much better. But again, it just depends. Now, to give you guys my final thoughts with those points, I think some of them are valid, but I still think that there's no excuse. Whenever you want something to be perfected, you will do your very best to prove that, and you will always get the best contracts or try to work things out with those investors. As a leader, you are responsible for a lot of things happening. If you have a bad leader in the power, then a lot of things are going to fall apart. A lot of things are going to come out wrong. So leadership is very important no matter where you are. As a leader, you are responsible for so many things happening the right way or the wrong way. And as I like to say, when you want something, you'll do everything in your power to get it. When you don't want something, you'll make endless excuses because you don't want it to happen. Your focus is not there. Simple as that. A good leader will take your company to victory. A good leader will guide you to success. If they do everything done by contract correctly, everything should get finished on time, and there's no excuses at the end of the day. If people are slacking off, if people aren't paying attention, they're not putting the dedication, then problems occur, as we see with video games, where they have a year to deliver a certain games, or probably 3 years, 5 years, whatever the time is, and half of that time is spent on a certain focus. Out of nowhere, the leader comes and tells you, scrap that, we're not doing that anymore. You just wasted so much time, so much potential and resources that could have gone into that or could have gone into other things. So that's why it's very important. Whoever is in charge of Tamashii Nations, Monster Arts, what have you, their goal is to always maintain everything and make sure everything is done correctly. At the end of the day, guys, what do you guys think? Do you guys believe that contracts are actually suppressing the full potential of Monster Arts, or do you believe that they have the freedom of choice to deliver what they want with those figures, modify whatever they want, and they could actually have access to the models? What do you think? Are you on board with this idea or are you not? As always, if you made it this far, this is RubiGamingx. Thank you for watching. I would really appreciate it if you subscribe to my channel. It helps me grow. Like the video, share it around. I would really like to hear your opinion. And if you are a developer or somebody that works with figures, let me know. Message me through Instagram of how this process works.